Bienvenidos al curso English for UABC Module 9 Intermediate Level. Fernanda wants to sell her scuba diving equipment. Mr. Garcia asks her what sports she likes to practice. Fernanda talks about how often she does the activities. She talks about how she feels about sports.
Hi Fer, what is that?
This? Oh, it's my equipment. I like scuba dive, but I'm selling this to buy a new one.
Oh, I see you like scuba diving. So, what else do you like?
I like volleyball, horse ride, tennis, and motocross.
Look Fer, we use like to express preference in two different ways. Using a noun or using a compound noun or a verb. For example, I like volleyball or basketball, and I like horse riding or swimming.
I see, Mr. Garcia, so I say I like scuba diving.
Right. And which other sports do you play?
Well, Betty invited me to play table tennis, but I don't know it.
Well, it is a kind of tennis but with smaller balls. And you play it on a table.
Honza told me we can go karting.
What is that?
It is a race like motocrossing.
You mean it's a kind of motocrossing, but with carts?
Yes, kind of.
Listen, we use kind of to indicate that something is partially similar to something else. For example, snowboarding is kind of like skiing. Rugby is kind of like football.
I understand, Mr. Garcia. For example, water polo is a kind of volleyball.
Very good. Now, Fer, let me ask you something.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
How often do you play sports?
How often? Well, scuba diving in the summertime. And I go swimming on Monday and Tuesday. We play volleyball on Fridays.
Remember that when we use the word often, we are referring to the frequency of things.
Yes.
We use always when something happens 100% of the time. Usually when something happens 90% of the time. Frequently when something happens 80% of the time. Often when it happens 70% of the time. Sometimes when it happens 40 to 50% of the time. Seldom when it happens 20% of the time. Hardly when it happens 10% of the time. And never when it happens 0% of the time.
Okay.
Now, using these adverbs of frequency, how often do you go scuba diving?
I sometimes do scuba diving and I always feel happy.
Do you swim?
I usually swim and sometimes I feel tired.
Do you play volleyball?
We always play volleyball on Fridays and I never miss a game.
Do you play tennis?
I don't play tennis and I don't do motocrossing, but I like to watch them on TV.
Fair. Now I will ask you some questions and you will answer them, okay?
Got it.
Do you sometimes go motorcycling?
I hardly go motorcycling.
How do you feel about it?
I always feel nervous about it.
Do you usually think about parachuting?
We frequently think about parachuting.
How do you feel about it?
We often feel excited about it.
Do you consider going skydiving?
We hardly consider skydiving. It is never cheap.
So notice, Fer, this is the structure. A frequency adverb goes before a main verb. For example, she doesn't usually participate in the competition. Or an adverb of frequency goes after the verb to be. For example, I am sometimes tired after the tryouts.
I always learn something new in your class, Mr. Garcia.
Well, thank you, Fer. See you tomorrow.
English for UABC. Thank you for joining us. Esperamos hayan disfrutado este video. Los esperamos en el siguiente módulo.